All right. Thank you so much, Adrian, and to Rupa for putting this together. So, who am I? If this is the first time you hear me do any kind of these talks, I've been in practice for 31 years, which is a long time. And I've been training doctors since 2006 in the Kalish method. And really, what that means is that I teach people how to set up and run their practices. And I focus on lab interpretation skills development because I think that's a big area that is really important. You got to learn all this stuff and it's complicated. I've worked with Mayo Clinic, I've worked with all the top people in our field. And I'm really here basically as a resource to get practices started. That's my current role in the industry. So, to that end, we have what is a ridiculously low priced class. It's free. That's about as cheap as you can get. And this is actually a really good class that we're giving away. I spent a long time on this one. So, it's a GI boot camp that teaches you how to explain to patients why they should do the test. Believe it or not, you have to learn how to do that. And it takes about a month to get through all this material. At the end of that month, you will be able to explain to every new patient why they should do a GI test. Okay. And that's a very important skill. And it could take years for people to figure it out. If you take this class, which again is free, then you'll have that down for the rest of your career. You know how to do that in a month. And we've put hundreds of people through this class. It really works. Not like some theoretical thing that I made up. This is like battle tested by functional medicine practitioners just like you. And that's free. You can scan the QR code. And then the code itself is the code you got to enter to get the free part of it is Kalish 24. And then that's not all. We also have a longer class. This is one of our protocol design classes that you have to pay for. It's part of our level 1 certification, and that is starting in June. If you really want to learn how to interpret GI labs, this is all straight up interpretation and then some more interpretation. Okay, that's what this class is for. So you can scan that code, you get a 20% discount on it if you want to really get into the details of how to interpret these labs. And in this particular class that you pay for, we'll actually be reviewing your labs as part of the course. So if you have a whole bunch of labs in your practice that you've just been wondering about, you can submit them to that class, and that's in June. Okay. So I want to start off like the understanding like this is not intuitively obvious. Like you can be really excited about the microbiome and know that it's important for all of your patients to deal with this, but still not have the ability to do it. And the critical nature of the testing means that you just have to somehow focus on this for a little while and understand the psychology behind all this. Right. And so that is going to be understanding the power of the lab itself. And in our culture, I'm sure this wasn't true 2000 years ago, but in our culture right now, labs have a lot of power. If you go to see your regular doctor and your regular doctor looks at you and she says, I think you should take a statin. Everybody knows that's stupid. Like, don't you want to check my cholesterol first? And what if she said, it looks like you have high cholesterol. You look like you wouldn't do it. We're all programmed. High cholesterol, take a statin. Whether you believe in statins or not, that doesn't matter. We've all been programmed in this way. And so our whole culture is familiar with this model of do the test and then do the treatment. And that's what we want to capitalize upon in functional medicine is we want to use that psychology to our advantage. By the way, someone asked for the codes here. Let me just show real quick before I forget. So there's a code for the free boot camp, Kalish 24. You can scan the QR thing there, Kalish 24 is a code. And then we'll be sending these out later too, okay? And then Kalish 24 again is the discount code if you want to do the full-on class, the longer class, not the free one. The free one just tells you how to explain patients to patients how to do labs. This is interpretation. This free one, not interpretation, just to clarify that, okay? Interpretation, you got to pay for it. All right. So if you don't do a GI test, there's absolutely no way for you to know what's going on with someone's microbiome. It's complicated enough even when you get the labs back. Okay, so in my mind, the unique really focus or the center point really is a way of saying it of functional medicine is lab testing for the gut. Nobody does it better than we do. We've been doing these gut tests. I've been doing it for 31 years. The labs have been around for probably 40 or 50 years. This is something that we for real understand. We're generations ahead. We're 2 generations ahead of being able to fix a microbiome compared to any other profession on the planet. This is like functional medicine's thing. And it's been our thing since the 1970s. Okay. So now conventional medicine and the conventional research community is understanding how important the microbiome is, but they're a little late to the party, to be honest. Not to put them down. We're glad that they joined the party. If you were at a party and someone came in late, you wouldn't be mad that they'd be like, oh, I'm glad you're here. But then you would think, you're a little late to the party. So we're the experts at this. You seize the moment and understand that in your mind's eye. So you really feel confident in understanding that you can be able to do this work effectively. And that's what you're going to be able to convey to patients. That confidence will allow the patient to trust you, which will allow them to get the test. So why is selling labs so important? Because it sets the stage, just like the whole statin industry has been built around testing for cholesterol and then you get the drug, right? The whole functional medicine GI industry or field has been built around the idea that if you do the GI test, the patient is during that moment when they decide to purchase the test, they're making a decision that they're going to, after they get the test done, they're going to come back and see you because you're going to be the one that interprets the test. So right away that they're coming back and that they're investing in you as an expert and to help interpret and understand what they should do. Almost everybody that buys a lab, it should be like 95% of the people that buy a lab are going to listen to you about the lifestyle changes. They're going to listen to you about the supplement protocols that you want to do. And because they've done the test and they take the supplements that you designed, the supplement protocol you designed, and because they take the test and that impacts them and it encourages them to do the lifestyle changes, that's what gets people better because they invested in the lab test. Now they understand. Because think about it in the reverse. Like why would you go through the hassle of doing a stool test and then not listening to what your doctor tells you about it? Once you've made that commitment to get the test, you're really committing to doing the treatment. And that's what we need. Even if the treatment is primarily lifestyle related, like diet or something, there's still the doing of the test and they have a yeast overgrowth. And then you tell them if you fungal overgrowth, you're going to really have to stop sugar and alcohol for a few months. That's what gets people better, right? But the motivation to make the lifestyle changes is going to come about because they did the lab. If they don't do the lab, they're not buying into anything that you're selling at all. And they're not going to come back. They're not going to do supplement programs. They're certainly not going to listen to your lifestyle advice if they don't trust you enough to do the test. So your patient compliance just drops dramatically. Not to zero, but pretty much there. It's a vote of not confidence in you if they don't do the testing. Okay. This is my original teacher, Dr. Bill Timmons. He's been long gone now, but lives on in spirit. And one of his quotes, and it just echoes in my brain every day that I'm in practice, because Bill used to say this to me all the time. The effectiveness of your clinical program is ultimately predicated on the depth and accuracy of the available lab data. He said that over and over again for the 10 or 12 years I knew him. The fact is, think about it. How effective you are as a clinician is based on the amount and accuracy of the lab data that you acquire. This is the foundation of functional medicine. GI lab data is required for you to be a good practitioner. Nothing that's more important than that. So we have this whole lab whisperer story. And what that means really is that you need to become an expert at really understanding what the labs are for. And we're going to get to that in a few slides so that you can explain to patients why it's so important for them to do. And then you can do the lab, then you can do the supplement programs, the lifestyle changes predicated on all that stuff. So then patients are going to complain that the labs are too expensive. Why do I have to do the test? Can't you just give me something that's going to make my stomach feel better right now? Or they may come in and say, my best friend saw you and you gave them this product and they lost weight, they feel great. And can I just do that? No, you have to let people know that these are individualized programs that are personalized. They're based on the testing. The reason why you're so successful in your practice is because you believe in the whole test, don't guess phenomenon. Who knows why you have GERD or reflux? We're going to test, not guess, and figure that out. And so in terms of how people make this decision to actually get the test kit, one would think that it's all based on logic, but it's 100% based on emotion, 100%. So in my first years of practice, I would explain the logic of the labs. Let me tell you what the test is. And it was very sciencey and it worked, but not really very well at all. What matters is how people are feeling about things. People buy things when they feel like they need them. And so you need to figure out how you're going to get into that person's head in a way and understand where they're coming from so that you can talk to them in a way that they want to do the test. And by the way, that free class that we're offering goes into this whole process of how to do this in excruciating detail. I'm not going to do that now. If you're really interested in figuring that out, you can do the free course. Okay. Uh, the lab, how to order the lab class, basically. So then the roles of labs in practice building, and that's just one of the things that I've really been focused on since 2006 is how do we, build practices? The lab tests give you a key sort of center point around which you can structure your connection with your patients. So you have this thing that you can analyze and then explain. It makes you the expert. It shows you exactly what treatments you should do and what things you should avoid. It allows you to get right to the heart of what's going to make a big clinical impact for that patient. And then there's this other thing is everybody just appreciates tests for things. We just are so used to being tested, whether it's in a school situation and there's exams that are going to be tested, or whether you're getting tested for the bar exam or your medical license testing or a lab test, right? Testing is just all around us. You have to get a test just to drive a car, right? Driver's license test. So people just get into testing if you can frame it in a good way because they get excited when the results come back, and you should be excited about it too. It's really fun. It's fun to do this stuff. I should mention that. What was the old saying we had with the fun in functional medicine? It's actually fun to do this if you're on top of your game and you understand how to interpret the labs. And then make sure that you charge for your time adequately. We find that every single practitioner that comes into one of my boot camps is undercharging. And so we're just trying to put an end to that undercharging thing. So I was in Columbus, Ohio about 10 years ago, and I was teaching a GI conference for a weekend. And there was a bunch of Kalish mentorship students that were in the class that were just coming to say hi and hanging out with me for the weekend as I was teaching. And so this one woman comes up to me. I didn't know her. And she comes up during the break and she says, we call Jeannie, which is not her real name. We call Jeannie, this other doctor, the lab whisperer. What are you guys talking about? She says, I don't know, but I'm a medical doctor. I run this large clinic, functional medicine clinic. And Jeannie, who you trained, is the only doctor in our clinic who every single patient, every single new patient buys every single kit that she wants them to do. And so we call her the lab whisperer because no one else can figure out how to do this. Okay, that's the basis. That conversation is the basis of the free course. The free course is how to be a lab whisperer. And I went up to Jeannie after this. I was like, hey, your boss just told me that you're a lab whisperer. What are you doing back there? She's like, I'm just doing what you taught us in class. Okay, this really works consistently. You could be in Columbus, Ohio, or in Iowa, or in Las Cruces, New Mexico. People are always the same everywhere in terms of how they decide to do these tests. And when you're at the mastery level of this, 95% of your new patients will walk out of your clinic with a kit. That's really the goal that we're striving for. How do you even think about doing this? Figure out what is the patient's perspective. You have to see things from their angle. What are they worried about? What are they concerned about? It may be very different from the things that you're worried about. Honestly, it could be the opposite. You really don't know. Once you figure that part out, now you can engage in conversation from their perspective, right? So you're explaining things so that they're understanding it from their perspective and it makes sense to them. There's something about using very clear, simple language, but every 5 minutes, you need to throw in a term that they don't understand so that they understand it more than they do. So you don't want to be rude about it. You don't want to give them so many complex scientific terms that they get lost, but you absolutely need to be the dominant person in the conversation and be the expert. And again, I'll use, if we're talking about GI testing, the funnest thing to use really is in one of the organisms. So then you can learn, you got to study how to pronounce them a little bit, but Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, that's a really good one. I like saying that one. Or you could even do something like Akkermansia. That one's really popular right now. Memorize a few GI related terms and that you can just toss into the conversation. And then the person will start to realize, oh, okay, this doctor knows a lot about this more than I do, right? Because you don't want them thinking that they're going to go off and interpret their labs on their own. That's like crazy town. We don't want that. And if you can figure out what they're interested in, let's say that their main symptom is that they get sick all the time and that they're tired and they don't sleep, then you want to explain why the GI testing is important for immune health and energy and the ability to get a good night's rest. So you could talk about how the majority of the immune system is in and around the gut. And so to do an analysis of the immune system and really understand why it's not working properly, we want to test your gut. to let them explain to them that we're feeding all the energy systems of the body from our food, obviously. If you're not digesting and breaking your food down well, especially things like protein, then you're going to be tired all the time and not sleep very well. So, whatever their complaints are, you want to tie it back to the GI testing itself. And then there are some obvious things here that we can go over in terms of ordering GI labs. So, there's patients with GI symptoms, which kind of implies that there's patients without GI symptoms as well. Let's talk about the easy part first. Patients with GI symptoms. This would be the common stuff you hear every day: gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, heartburn, reflux, food allergies, nausea, those kinds of things. Okay. When you're first ordering these tests, if you've only been in practice for a short period of time, I don't know, a year or two or something like that, don't get into serious GI cases like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. Just save those for later. Refer them out for now, or it's not a good experience for the patient or for you if you're working with really seriously ill people when you're first learning how to do this. That sounds obvious, but almost everybody in our industry learns about functional medicine, figures out 10 patients in their practice that they really want to test. And every 10 of those people, every one of those 10 people has got some serious, horrible problem that no other doctor on the planet could fix. And so you don't want to start with the most difficult patients when you're in the very beginning of this. It's really a bad experience. It's not fair to the patient. And you're just going to get turned off to doing functional medicine because they're going to be hard to fix. So start with easy ones. The easy ones are lightweight functional problems. I don't know, like reflux. You could always fix reflux. That one's easy. Just do like a bunch of reflux or gas and bloating kind of patients, but not people with serious problems, because that'll really torpedo your practice before you even get started. But then you also want to then, with these people, obviously the easy ones, describe how the lab will identify the underlying causes of their GI complaint. And in a minute, we're going to look at slides that are more specific on all that. I usually show a sample of the GI lab report so you can see the microbiome analysis, the functional GI organ issues, the pathogen screening part. So I break these tests down into three areas: microbiome, GI organs, and pathogens. And you can show them a sample test and say, this is what we're going to be looking for, so they can see what the lab report actually looks like and they get an inkling of what's going to be happening here. And then there's this whole, and this is again patient education, straight up patient education, how you can have the one to many and the many to one. By that, there can be one symptom like bloating, and that could be from many causes. It could be from a yeast overgrowth or from a gluten sensitivity. So one symptom can be from many different causes. So in functional medicine, we want to test so we can personalize the program and understand, with this one symptom that you have, we don't treat everyone with bloating the same. If you have H. pylori, we're going to treat that. If it's a gluten problem, we're going to eliminate gluten. So being able to explain to patients that you can't treat symptoms in functional medicine because there's so many different things that can cause an individual symptom. You really don't want to work like that. It's just not going to, be effective. The opposite is true too, the many to one. So one agent like yeast overgrowth could trigger 100 different symptoms. So you can have a yeast overgrowth and be tired. You can have a yeast overgrowth and have sugar cravings. You can have a yeast overgrowth and be depressed. You can have a yeast overgrowth and have fungal infections all over your body. So one problem like yeast overgrowth can trigger all these different symptoms. And then one symptom can be from many causes. So when you acknowledge the reality of this, which is just the reality of the universe, it's not a functional medicine concept. This is a universal concept. Then you realize, how could you even think about treating somebody without an accurate lab? You couldn't. Let me go right back to Dr. Timmons saying how good you are as a clinician depends on the amount and quality of your lab work. And it's not a more is better for infinite thing. It's a more is better to a certain point. And I believe, I just mentioned it now, in 3 essential tests you should do on every patient if you're good: adrenals, GI, and some kind of metabolomic organic acids type test. So adrenals, GI, and some kind of urine sample test for organic acids of some kind. Okay. Now you can have one symptom, and sometimes this happens, and it's really, you just nail the underlying cause through testing, like boom, first test, and you fix it. I put gallbladder on here because that one happens a lot. And how lucky could that be? You could have like all kinds of problems with bloating. In the lab that it's a gallbladder issue, you give them gallbladder support and the whole problem goes away. I wish it was always that easy, but sometimes it can be like that. It could also be that you see a yeast overgrowth in the lab and you knock that out. And then the bloating is gone and the sugar cravings are gone. So you're getting a whole bunch of symptoms cleared up with a single treatment. And it varies. But the one thing that I'd say after 30 years of doing this and thousands, tens of thousands of labs, and in the mentorship program I teach, I have 4 hours a week and we get 20 students in each group. We get 5 or 8 cases each hour. So I'm looking at, I don't know, hundreds of these labs in a given month just from my students that are submitting them. So I've seen a lot of these different cases. One of the things that will constantly shock you once you get into this is the variety of symptoms that will completely go away after you do a GI program is just mind numbing. It's hard to wrap your mind around the kinds of things that are going to get better if you figure out how to do these GI programs. Okay. It's a super important skill set to have. You can also have this one underlying root cause found on a test and have all these symptoms resolved. Like I was just saying, gallbladder is like my favorite version of that. Pancreatic enzymes sometimes. We have the students in the class now in the mentorship are really into enzymes. We're going through an enzyme phase with everybody because they work really well. If you haven't used pancreatic enzymes in the past with patients, then if they test for it and you give it to them, it's a home run almost every single time. It could be joint pain that gets better. It could be obviously gas and bloating and those kinds of things. It even could be something like sleep or mood that gets better just from digestive enzymes. It's pretty phenomenal. And you can give enzymes without the lab testing, but the whole point of the work that we're doing here is to base it on labs. So there's an advanced level for this. An AP class, I don't know. When my son was in high school, he took a lot of AP classes. I never did, but this is the advanced placement level. And you don't have to get into this right away. And if this intimidates you, then you can let it go. But the highest level of functional medicine is doing GI testing on people that have no GI symptoms. And again, that month-long class that's free gets into the details on how you can do this. So in my practice, as in my teacher, Dr. Timmons' practice, every single patient gets a GI test. It doesn't matter how old you are or what your chief complaints are. You could be depressed. You could be having a fertility problem. Your hair could be falling out. Doesn't matter. Everybody gets a GI test, whether they have GI symptoms or not. And what you will find when you get to this sort of mastery level of ordering a test on everybody is that most people with GI problems have no GI symptoms. I'm going to say that again. Most people with GI problems, as identified on these tests, have no GI symptoms. What do they have? Depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, fatigue, mitochondrial problems, infertility, hormone issues. They have other kinds of problems that are manifesting because their GI tract is messed up. So when I was learning this work in the 1990s, 1992, 93, Dr. Timmons was still alive. And in order to talk to Dr. Timmons, before you could even walk in the door of his clinic and talk to him, you had to have already done a GI test. It didn't matter if you had cancer or if you had high cholesterol, it didn't matter at all. Everybody had to do a GI test. At that time, I was like 30 years old, and I thought that was a little crazy. I thought, man, this is a nice old guy, this Timmons guy. He's like a naturopath. He seems like he knows what he's doing. But this is a little extreme. What do I do now? I do the exact same thing. I'm like his age. I'm 60 years old. I make everybody do a GI test. So you may think it's a little crazy, but if you want to get to the advanced level, this will revolutionize your practice. Test with GI testing for people without GI complaints. Okay, we're going to zip through these 3 stages of GI dysfunction just so you can have a broad understanding of how I try to explain the testing. Because the tests, whichever lab company you use, and there's many good ones out there, they're all going to be complicated. They're all going to have a lot of markers, 50, 100, 200 different markers on these labs if you add everything up. And so there's no way that you're ever going to really, to be honest with you, understand every marker on these tests. Unless you decide to get a PhD in microbiology, you're probably not going to be able to pronounce every marker on these tests. Okay. It's just gotten too complicated. It didn't used to be like this. In the old days, when I started doing this, it was all on one page. It was, but now it's like all these labs are doing things in a very complex way. And so that's good though. That's good. But you need to have a simple way to explain this to patients, or you're just going to be sunk before you even get started. So I figured we can all count to three. So I created 3 stages of GI dysfunction. We're talking about functional GI disorders here, functional heartburn, reflux, nausea, vomiting. Okay. No extreme diseases, no blood in the stool, no Crohn's disease, none of that stuff. Just functional, milder problems that we're looking at. Okay. That's what you want to focus on. And here are the 3 different stages that you can explain. Now, whatever testing company you use, you can apply this model. Doesn't matter what company is your favorite one. You can use this exact same model. 3 stages: the microbiome, GI organs, and pathogens. Every test in our industry looks at the microbiome, GI organs, and pathogens. So when you're talking to patients about this and trying to rationalize why they should do the test, you can explain, hey, I want to run this stool test. What does it look for? We're going to look for 3 major areas. The microbiome itself, the good bacteria, are going to be measured. High, low, how are they? The GI organs, we're going to look at organ function, see if there's anything going on there. And then they all also screen for infections in the gut or pathogens. So how does this all work? I think of it as a progressive series of steps, such that what I call stage 1, which is the disruption of the microbiome, is what leads this all off. And that comes about mostly because people eat really poorly. We had a doctor in the mentorship like a month ago, and she was submitting a GI test on herself. And the microbiome portion of her lab wasn't good, it was perfect, absolutely perfect. And so I told her, you've been eating really healthy. I didn't ask her what was going on. I told her what was going on. I said, you've been eating really clean for at least 20 years. And she started laughing and she said, yeah, I eat everything out of my garden where I grow all my own food, whatever fantasy land she lives in. I can't remember where she lives now. And I've been doing that for over 20 years. And I'm sure she eats something from the store, but generally, almost all of her diet came from her garden. I was like, oh, okay. If you do that for 20 years, you're going to have a perfect microbiome. Anybody who does that for 20 years. But how many of your patients are doing that? Not that many. So you're going to see microbiome disruption on most people because what we consider food these days has just become like a joke. I see the kids, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, they have things they're eating that you just can't even really conceptualize what some of these items are anymore. Like we had candy when I was a kid, but the new level of sodas and energy drinks and just weird ass sugary stuff that people are eating is just crazy town. Okay, so most of the people that we're working with have a disturbed microbiome. If that goes on for too long or gets really bad, then this stage 1 problem can bleed over to be a stage 2 problem. And stage 2 means that there's a problem with the organs themselves. Okay, now the organs are being disrupted some significant way. So there's a bunch of studies here, and you could go on. You don't want to obsess on studies right now. We don't have time, but there's studies that talk about the microbiome, thousands, probably tens of thousands of research studies in the microbiome in diet, microbiome in sleep, microbiome in stress. There's more research on this subject now than you could ever read. Okay. And type 2 diabetes, its microbiome's connected with pretty much every illness known to humankind now. Just so you know, this is well-researched information at this point in human history. Stage 2 then is what happens when the microbiome's been screwed up for long enough. Now the organs aren't working well. Your stomach's not making hydrochloric acid. Your pancreas is not making enzymes. Your gallbladder is not making bile. Your gut lining is inflamed or damaged, or you have leaky gut. Something's wrong with an organ now. So that's what I call a stage 2. And again, all the labs in our industry have multiple ways of checking for GI organ dysfunction. And if you have a problem with the stomach, you fix it. Problem with the gallbladder, you fix it. This is pretty straightforward. Problem with the microbiome, you fix it, right? And for microbiome corrections, prebiotics, probiotics, butyrate. For GI organ dysfunctions, depending on what the organ is. If it's a pancreas, you give them enzymes. If it's the gallbladder, you give gallbladder support. If it's the stomach, you give betaine ACL. If it's leaky gut, you give them leaky gut repair powders. So the stage that they're in implies what the treatment's going to do. Again, for microbiome treatments, I use prebiotics, probiotics, and butyrate. And then for the stage 2 problems, we use different types of supplement protocols depending on which organ is messed up. Pancreas, gallbladder, the immune response in the gut itself, those are common things that we're treating all the time. So then if the stage 1 or microbiome problem goes on for long enough, now you've got some GI organ issues. Now that goes on for long enough, then you can have a weakening of your body's natural defenses. You don't have the enzymes and bile, and the immune sort of system is not as robust as it should be. And then you're going to get disruptions in the microbiome along with these problems with the organs. And then all of a sudden, the person either picks up an infection in their gut or a dormant infection in the gut starts to flare up. Body can't control it anymore. And that's what I call stage 3. So stage 1, microbiome, stage 2, GI organs, stage 3 is now there's a GI infection that you need to grapple with. Okay. And parasites are probably the most important. Blastocystis, Giardia, Crypto, Ehisto, Endolimex nano, Cryptosporidium, Dientamoeba fragilis, that's another one. You see these every day in class. If you're lucky enough to find a parasite on one of these GI tests, you should just take a deep breath, relax, go open a nice bottle of wine. I don't know, take a run, go to yoga class, whatever you do when I'm going to treat myself to something, schedule a massage every time you get a parasite lab back, because you for sure are going to be able to help that person. If you can find a parasite on one of these tests, you're golden. You're going to make a big difference in that person's life. Okay. And super important to be able to treat these infections. Life-changing results so many times. Whew, I just could go on for years about the different stories, but I don't want to bore you guys. All right. So 3 different stages, the microbiome disrupted, the GI organs not working great, and then there can be an infection. And then guess what happens? The infection makes the microbiome worse, which causes even more problems with inflammation, which damages the organs more. So it ends up that a person gets on a feedback loop here where everything's making everything worse. And so we're trying to disrupt that by doing the testing. And I'll just say one more time, if you're beginning in the work, the first year or 2, just test everybody with GI symptoms that are obvious. If you're advanced, if you're an overachiever and you're just starting out, if you took all those AP classes in high school like my son did, if you're like just one of those kind of people like I am, then you should be testing everybody with a GI test, even if they have no GI symptoms. In the beginning, that sounds a little like a bad idea, but once you get neurological cases to resolve, pre-diabetics to resolve, once you have a couple of fertility cases that get pregnant because you did a GI test, even though have no GI symptoms, then you're going to become more of a believer and you'll get more into this. Okay, so that's the advanced assignment. Quick review here. There are these 3 different stages, and this is a great tool for patient education, patient explanation, so that you can get this figured out and get patients on board to start. Okay. Microbiome imbalance, GI organ dysfunction, and then eventually there can be infections. So if you want to pursue this, you want to order labs and submit them and have me review them with you in our group class, you can sign up for this boot camp, 20% off. The code is Kalish24. The offer expires May 25th, so get on it if you want to do this. The class starts on June the 5th, and this is going to be specific protocol design, specific lab tests with specific supplements and how to dose people right and how to get the whole thing done. And that is one of our series of protocol design classes. Okay, you get 20% off. It's a good deal, and it's not a very expensive class anyways. And then if you want to do our free class, what I encourage everyone to do, this is not an interpretation class. This class is interpreting. That's why it says learn to interpret. This class, no interpretation. This is just how to explain all this to a patient. Because if you can't explain this, they're not going to do the test, and then you don't get to the chance to even interpret things. So I even have practitioners that have been in practice for 5 or 6 years that take this lab ordering class and get a lot out of it. This is what turns you into a lab whisperer, right? So those are your options. I hope to interact with some of you guys in the boot camp here. And I'm going to open it up for questions. We got about 10 minutes for questions.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.